For this episode, I just want to focus on this therapy scene with Melfi. So we start off with Tony crying over the portrait that he got of him and Pyomai. So right off the bat, we get Tony describing himself as this sad clown, right? This fool that has to put on this happy face constantly. But that cannot be further from the truth, right? He killed Ralphie over Pyomai. And even then, he is also the one causing himself his own harm 90% of the time. And he still wants people to feel bad for him. And Melfi calls this out immediately, referencing how Carmela mentioned that he would always get angry or start eating food to get over his emotions. She said she would expect him to respond with rage, and he did. He killed Ralphie over this. And then he acts like his mom, saying she'd rather want Carmela there probably instead of him. In this situation, his mom would have said, I shouldn't have said anything, fuck me. Then Melfi mentions the ducks. She points out how Tony is grieving over this horse, but never for family or friends. He gets annoyed immediately, calling it Freudian bullshit to think that way, when the reality is that Tony doesn't understand how to comprehend his own grief. He mentioned Dumpling's Prozac for 10 days as if that would do anything. But Melfi is trying to do the work for Tony, connecting the dots between the ducks, saying how they were an embodiment of fear that he had of something bad happening to his family. But Tony cannot get over Pyomai, and then he begins spiraling. He mentions Ralphie's son getting hit by an arrow, and Melfi has a quick line saying how horrible for the parents, and Tony says, yeah. And he mentions Chris's drug problem. Then he mentions his anxieties about 9/11, and Melfi asks him, has any of his associates thought about this? And he says, I don't know, we don't talk about it. Again, this is all of Tony's emotions being bottled up and kept inside. This is why he mentioned being the sad clown, because all he's doing is feeling these things, but not letting them out and communicating them to the people around him. Then he quotes Rodney King Jr. saying, why can't we all just get along? He calls it ridiculous, and Melfi says, what is so ridiculous about it? Then he acknowledges all the pain and suffering that he's caused people. He mentions how Carmela prays to God. What kind of God would allow this? What kind of God would allow Tony to be who he is? And that is ultimately why Tony will never be able to heal from any of this, because he will never be able to change his belief system and who he can be. Even then, personally, I'd argue he is a significant reason why Christopher is addicted to heroin. Again, we're talking about a show about mobsters, right? They are not that separate from these drugs. But then on top of that, he is the one leading Chris down this path. He says he has high hopes for Christopher. High hopes of Christopher doing what? Being him? At this point in time, he has given Chris that heroin addiction. And at this point too, Tony is Christopher's best case scenario. The path that Christopher is going down is 10 times worse than Tony's. Because again, this is the downfall, right? This Tony in therapy is the worst case scenario for the mob. It is collapsing in front of all of them because none of them can contain their emotions anymore. The Tony this far down in the spiral and at the top of the hierarchy, he is causing harm to everyone around him. Just another really great scene showing you everything about Tony's character and his mindset throughout this spiral that he's facing and how he's trying to change but never will because he does not want to ultimately. And again, Melfi showing you how well she knows Tony. I'd love to talk more about this episode in the comments. Thank you.